So, and this is not pie in the sky. You know, we have really radical left-wing fanatics like T. Boone Pickens and Warren Buffett investing billions of dollars in renewable energy in the form of wind power. Now, you know, T. Boone is talking about natural gas and even nukes. Warren Buffett is a little smarter. Warren Buffett was about to invest in a privately owned nuclear plant in Idaho, and he just backed out. But he does own a $250 million wind farm in Iowa, and he ain't letting go of that one, believe me. And so I will tell you, and I follow the industry very closely, wind power is here to stay, and there is absolutely no excuse whatsoever for building any kind of generating facility west of the Mississippi that is not renewable, that it is not wind or solar or biofuels. Because obviously we have all the biofuels we need west of the Mississippi. In the Southwest, we have all the solar we could ever use with currently available technology, and all through the Great Plains, from the Texas Panhandle up to North Dakota, out to Montana, down to New Mexico. There is more wind power than this country could ever possibly use. Now, you can't really ship it to the east, but in west of the Mississippi, absolutely no excuse for even thinking about digging another coal mine or burning another gallon of oil or building another nuclear plant. It makes absolutely no sense in the strictest possible capitalistic terms. As a matter of fact, I never thought I'd heard myself saying that, but I am for abolishing all subsidies to any form of energy generation. Because if you put a level playing field and you get wind power and solar power up against even coal and even nukes, and especially nukes, and oil and gas, wind power and solar power win. These technologies are here. We are not talking about anything in the future. You know, they're getting a megawatt and a half, 2 megawatts. These are very big machines. I live in a state, Ohio. We have really good wind at the State House in Columbus. Outside of that, it doesn't go very far. But the reality is where we have great wind is in the Great Lakes. You look at Lake Erie, you look at the wind maps of Lake Erie, it's all class 7, which is the best. Lake Erie is shallow. It's the cities, Toronto, well, Toronto's in Lake Huron, but Buffalo, Toledo, Cleveland, Detroit, all these cities can get all their electricity from windmills in the Great Lakes, and in our lifetimes, we will see it. It is here, it is ready, and that is where the money is. The Danes have put in big offshore wind arrays. Germany now has gone so far with wind power that they've pretty much run out of good spots in land on Germany, and so they're going into the North Sea and the Baltic and wherever else they can put these monster machines. And so this is a technology which was pie in the sky, kind of, back in the 1970s, and has absolutely boomed into where we can get our energy in the future. In Solartopia. I mean, in Solartopia, you know, we say no more nuclear plants. And that's a big difference. You gotta watch out now. I love Al Gore. He's a wonderful guy. He's done a great job of promoting the idea, the reality that global warming is very real, but he's left the door open for nuclear. Because these nuclear promoters are running around saying nuclear power doesn't create greenhouse gases and all this stuff. It's false. It's a lie. Greenhouse gases are very much produced by nuclear power in the mining, the milling, the transport of nuclear fuel. They directly heat the environment with all the waste heat that goes into the rivers and the lakes and the oceans. And then we have the problem of dealing with the radioactive fuel. Nowhere is the problem worse than right in downtown St. Louis. But I have been to Yucca Mountain. Anybody in here else been to Yucca Mountain? Oh, you have. We refer to it as a national suppository. It is a catastrophic mistake. You can walk through Yucca Mountain, as I did, and I'm sure you did, and see the earthquake fault. I'm walking through Yucca Mountain. There's like a line that you can see, and I say to the geologist I'm walking with, what is that? And he says, oh, that's the earthquake fault. That's brilliant. And then they have perched water up top, and then if you stand at the lip of Yucca Mountain, where they want to bring all the radioactive waste, and you look around at these mountains, they're dormant volcanoes. The place, how long have they been dormant? 5,000 years. How long do they want to store the fuel? Oh, 250,000. I mean, this is absolute patent insanity. And we don't need these nuclear plants. Now, let me talk a bit about the finance, because that's very crucial. It's the most crucial part of the puzzle, because that's how we win. The reality is that no one on Wall Street will invest private money in a nuclear power plant. They are, and private money, by the way, is pouring into renewables. We have $6 billion worth of windmills in this country, either on order or under construction. And capital and Wall Street, all these guys are sitting there, green finance, they're all looking for solar, they're all looking for wind to invest in. Nobody will invest in nuclear power. So where do they go? What are they doing? Well, they're going two places. First of all, the industry has gone to the federal government, and they are demanding loan guarantees and subsidies and all this other stuff to pay for these ridiculous nuclear plants. Now, I will tell you one thing right off the top. The first piece of subsidy that they have, without which they can't operate, even the old plants, let alone the new ones, is the insurance. Since 1957, this is 51 years now. This is not a new technology. There's nothing innovative or advanced about nuclear power. You know, it's older than the Edsel, for God's sakes. And you know, the reality is that the first nuclear reactor opened in 1957. Now, when the government went to the utility industry and said, we want you to build nuclear plants. And why? Because basically they wanted to put a happy face on the nuclear weapons industry. So they went to the utility guys and said, we want you to build nuclear plants. And the utility guy says, are you nuts? They already had a study from the Sandia laboratory which showed thousands of people would be killed in a nuclear accident at a nuclear plant, and a land mass, ironically enough, the size of Pennsylvania would be irradiated. That's what they talked about. Pennsylvania, somebody must have known what was going to happen. But, you know, in fact, none of the utility guys would build them, including the ones here in Missouri. And so the industry got from the Congress something called the Price-Anderson Act, which indemnified them and protected them and still protects them from a major accident. If Callaway melts down and the cloud comes in, God forbid, and wipes out St. Louis, guess how much insurance they have to cover it? Zip. I mean, it's inconsequential. They have a certain amount of money. I mean, maybe it's $10 billion, something like that, in a pool. And maybe you know, Kate, do you know the exact number? No. I mean, what difference does it make? You know, a nuclear, we saw in Chernobyl blew up, right? It only operated for 3 months, Chernobyl. And it did not have that much radiation inside compared to the older reactors. If an older reactor, God forbid, went like Chernobyl went, it would be orders of magnitude worse. And Chernobyl was in a remote area, an impoverished area, 80 miles, or 80 kilometers rather, from the nearest city. You know, if those planes that flew into the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001, had flown into the Indian Point nuclear plant instead, I can't even begin to describe the loss of life or the loss of property. There are not numbers big enough to describe the loss of property and how many hundreds of thousands of people would have died on September 11th, 2001 if it had not been the World Trade Center. They flew right over Indian Point. And it could happen at any reactor in the United States. And so the nuclear industry, 50 years ago, they said, well, just give us 15 years. Give us the Price-Anderson Act. The government will cover all the possible liability. Give us 15 years, and in 15 years, we will have private insurers lining up to insure these wonderful nuclear plants that are going to get so much better. Well, guess what happened 15 years after that, and then 15 years after that, and another 15 years after that. And so 51 years later, it's still the federal government insuring nuclear plants like Callaway and all that. And they want to build this new generation, which they say is going to be so much safer, but they're going to have the same insurance coverage. And they won't build them without that same insurance coverage. It's a complete scam, and utter nonsense. So that's number one on the list of federal subsidies. But then they go in, and they did this a year ago, and they said, well, we want $50 billion in loan guarantees so that we can get Wall Street companies to loan money to build nuclear plants, which they won't loan us if it's not guaranteed by the federal government. What does that tell you, right? So they go into Congress, and luckily through all my years, one of the great things about being an anti-nuclear activist, you get to meet really cool people like Kay, and like a woman that is a really good friend of mine named Bonnie Raitt. She's a little better singer than Kay, but and Jackson Brown and Graham Nash. So they're friends of mine from benefit concerts we did. So I read about this in the New York Times. I called them up. The four of us had a phone call. They did a website and a music video, and then we had a press conference in Washington. We walked around the halls of Congress. You know, you haven't lived until you've walked the halls of Congress with Bonnie Raitt. I had a Mississippi Republican congressman follow me into the men's room to get an autograph from her. And I looked at him and said, well, what do you think about nuclear power? That was the end of that. So at any rate, you know, and we lobbied Congress, and we got them to remove $50 billion loan guarantee. We won. We do win these victories, you know. There's no reason. So now, this is happening this week. This week, they're back.